The city, once a vibrant hub of life and activity, now lay in ruins. Acrid smoke billowed from scattered fires, casting an eerie glow over the deserted streets. Abandoned vehicles lined the cracked pavement, reminders of the panicked exodus that had taken place just days earlier. In the midst of this devastation, Alex emerged from the shadows, his eyes darting left and right as he navigated the treacherous terrain. Just hours ago, he had been a scientist working on a top-secret government project, blissfully unaware of the horrors that were about to unfold. Now, he was a fugitive, running for his life. As he rounded a corner, he collided with a young woman, her eyes wild with fear. "Please, you have to help me," she cried, her voice trembling. Alex steadied her, his hands gripping her arms. "What's happening?" he demanded, his heart racing. "The dead, they're coming back to life," the woman gasped, her words punctuated by the anguished cries in the distance. "We have to get out of here." Alex's mind raced, his scientific training kicking in as he processed the implications of what she was saying. Could it be true? Could the dead really be rising from their graves? Before he could respond, a guttural snarl reached their ears, and Alex's blood ran cold. Whirling around, he saw the shambling figure of a man, his skin pallid and his eyes glazed over, lurching towards them with outstretched hands. "Run!" Alex shouted, grabbing the woman's hand and pulling her down the street. They weaved through the abandoned cars, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence, the only sound the relentless pursuit of the undead. As they turned a corner, they found themselves face to face with another group of survivors, a man and a woman, their expressions mirroring the terror they felt. "What's happening?" the man demanded, his voice laced with panic. "The dead, they're alive," the woman cried, her eyes wild. "We have to get out of here." Alex opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a horde of zombies came lurching into view, their putrid stench filling the air. The group scattered, each one running for their lives, desperate to escape the clutches of the undead. Alex ran, his lungs burning, his legs aching, but he refused to give in to the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume him. He had to survive, had to find a way to make sense of this nightmare. The images of the zombie-like creatures flashed through his mind, and he knew that whatever was happening, it was no ordinary outbreak. As he turned a corner, he collided with another figure, this one wielding a crowbar. The man's eyes were narrowed, his expression grim, and Alex knew instantly that he was a fighter. "What the hell is going on?" the man demanded, his voice low and gruff. I don't know," Alex stammered, his heart pounding in his chest. "But we need to get out of here now." The man nodded, his grip tightening on the crowbar. "Follow me," he said, his tone brooking no argument. Alex had no choice but to comply, his instinct for survival overriding his better judgment. As they weaved through the abandoned streets, the screams and snarls of the undead echoing all around them, Alex couldn't help but wonder what had happened and how this nightmare had begun. They rounded a corner and Alex's breath caught in his throat. Ahead of them, a young woman stood her ground, her face set in a determined expression as she wielded a baseball bat, fending off a group of the zombie-like creatures. "Samantha," the man called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. The woman, Samantha, whirled around, her eyes widening as she caught sight of the two men. Without a moment's hesitation, she gestured towards a nearby alley. "This way," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the din of the undead. Alex and the man followed her, their footsteps pounding against the pavement as they raced to escape the grasping hands of the zombies. As they reached the relative safety of the alley, Alex finally had a chance to catch his breath, his heart hammering in his chest. "What the hell is happening?" he asked, his voice ragged. Samantha turned to him, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. "I wish I knew," she said. "All I know is that the dead are coming back to life and they're hungry for us." The man stepped forward, his expression grim. "We need to find a safe place to hole up," he said, his voice low and steady. "This city is a death trap." Samantha nodded, her grip tightening on her bat. "Follow me," she said. "I know a place we might be able to hold out." As they made their way through the maze of alleys and abandoned streets, Alex couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. Whatever was happening, it was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he knew that the answers he sought might be more than he was prepared to handle. But as he followed Samantha and the other man, a glimmer of hope began to take root. Perhaps together, They could survive this nightmare and uncover the truth behind the outbreak. And if they did, maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to put an end to the horror that had consumed their city. The dim glow of emergency lights cast eerie shadows over the abandoned subway station where the group had taken refuge. Alex surveyed the space, his brow furrowed with a mixture of relief and unease. At least they had found a temporary safe haven, but the weight of the unknown still hung heavy in the air. Samantha, the young woman who had led them here, paced back and forth, her grip tight on the baseball bat she had used to fend off the undead. "We need to figure out what the hell is happening," she said, her voice tense. "I've never seen anything like this before." The man who had joined them, Liam, leaned against a crumbling pillar, his arms crossed over his chest. "I've got some experience dealing with emergencies," he said, his tone measured. "But this is something else entirely." Alex cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "I may have some answers," he said, his gaze shifting nervously. "Before the outbreak, I was working on a top-secret government project. I think it's somehow connected to what's happening." Samantha's eyes widened, and Liam straightened, his expression sharpening. "What kind of project?" Liam asked, his voice low and serious. Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself. "It was a research program focused on reanimating the dead," he said, his words laced with a sense of dread. "We were trying to find a way to bring people back to life, to cheat death." Samantha's face paled and Liam's jaw tightened. "And now the dead are walking the streets," he said, his tone grim. Alex nodded, his hands trembling slightly. I don't know exactly what went wrong, but somehow the project got out of control. The test subjects, they turned into these _things. Liam's brow furrowed, and he began to pace the small space, his mind clearly racing. "So the government was playing God, and now we're all paying the price," he said, his voice laced with a hint of anger. Samantha let out a shaky breath, her eyes darting around the dimly lit station. "We need to find a way out of this city," she said, her voice wavering. "If the government is behind this, we can't trust anyone." Alex's gaze met hers, and he could see the fear and uncertainty swirling in her expression. "I don't know how far this goes," he said, his voice low, "but I have to try and stop it to make things right." Liam turned to face them, his expression resolute. "Then we need to find a way to access that classified information," he said. "If the government is responsible for this, they might be the only ones who can stop it." Samantha nodded, her grip tightening on the bat. "Evelyn," she said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "She's a hacker, and she might be able to help us." Alex's eyes widened, and he felt a glimmer of hope. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice urgent. Samantha's gaze shifted, and she gestured towards a shadowy corner of the station. "Over there," she said. "She's been monitoring the situation, trying to figure out what's going on." Alex wasted no time, moving swiftly towards the corner where a young woman sat hunched over a laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Evelyn," he called out, his voice low and cautious. The woman looked up, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone guarded. "My name is Alex," he said, his expression earnest. "I was part of the government project that led to this outbreak. I think you might be able to help us uncover the truth." Evelyn's eyes widened and she straightened, her gaze flicking between Alex, Samantha, and Liam. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice laced with a hint of suspicion. Alex quickly explained his involvement in the project, the harrowing events that had led them to this abandoned subway station, and the dire need to access the classified information that could help them understand and potentially stop the outbreak. Evelyn's fingers flew across the keyboard, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've been trying to hack into the government's databases, but the security is tighter than I expected," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "They're keeping a tight lid on whatever's going on." Liam stepped forward, his expression grim. "Can you at least tell us what you've been able to find out?" he asked, his tone urgent. Evelyn nodded, her gaze shifting to the laptop screen. "From what I can gather, the government was conducting experiments on reanimating the dead," she said, her voice low. "They were using a highly experimental serum, one that was supposed to reanimate the cells and restore consciousness." Alex felt a chill run down his spine, the memory of his work flashing through his mind. That tracks with what I know, he said, his voice heavy with guilt. But something must have gone wrong, something that caused the subjects to become those _things _. Evelyn's expression darkened. According to the data I've been able to access, the serum was unstable, and it caused a rapid and uncontrolled cellular regeneration, she said, her fingers tapping frantically on the keyboard. The subjects not only regained consciousness, but they also became driven by an insatiable hunger for flesh. Samantha's face paled, and Liam's jaw tightened. So we're dealing with a full-blown zombie outbreak, he said, his voice grim. Evelyn nodded, her gaze shifting between the group. And it seems to be spreading rapidly, she said, her voice tinged with a sense of urgency. The government has been trying to contain it, but based on the information I found, they're losing control. Alex felt a surge of determination, his mind racing with the implications. We need to find a way to stop this, he said, his voice resolute. If the government can't handle it, then we have to try. Samantha stepped forward, her expression resolute. Then we need to get out of this city, find a safe place to regroup, and figure out how to put an end to this nightmare, she said, her gaze sweeping over the group. Liam nodded, his grip tightening on the crowbar he had been wielding. We'll need supplies, weapons, and a plan, he said, his tone authoritative. But first we need to get out of this station and find a way to survive. As the group began to hastily gather what few supplies they had, Alex couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. The truth they had uncovered was more horrifying than he could have imagined, and the weight of the responsibility now rested heavily on their shoulders. But with Samantha's determination, Liam's tactical expertise, and Evelyn's tech skills, he knew they had a fighting chance. They would need to be resourceful, resilient, and above all united if they had any hope of surviving this apocalyptic nightmare and uncovering the full extent of the government's involvement. The road ahead would be perilous, but for Alex, the need to make amends and stop the outbreak he had inadvertently helped create was a driving force that would not be extinguished. With a deep breath, he followed the others, his gaze resolute, his mind focused on the task at hand. They had to find a way to put an end to this horror, no matter the cost. The abandoned subway station offered a temporary respite from the horrors that had consumed the city, but the group knew their refuge was far from secure. With the undead roaming the streets above and the constant threat of other survivors vying for scarce resources, they needed to find a way to escape the city and uncover the full truth behind the outbreak. Alex paced the dimly lit platform, his mind racing with the implications of what Evelyn had uncovered about the government's role in this catastrophic event. If the serum was so unstable, how did it get out of the lab? He murmured, more to himself than to the others. Evelyn, her fingers flying across the keyboard, looked up, her brow furrowed in concentration. Based on the intel I was able to access, it seems there was a security breach at the government facility where the experiments were being conducted, she said, her voice tense. The serum was stolen and the perpetrator released it into the city, triggering the outbreak. Samantha, who had been standing guard near the stairwell, turned to face the group, her grip tightening on her baseball bat. So we're dealing with a deliberate attack, not just a lab accident, she asked, her expression hardening. Liam, who had been scouring the station for any additional supplies, rejoined the group, his expression grim. That would explain the scale and speed of the outbreak, he said, his voice low. Whoever did this wanted maximum chaos and destruction. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. And if the government can't contain it, then we're all in grave danger, he said, his voice tinged with urgency. Samantha nodded, her gaze sweeping over the group. Then we need to get out of this city as soon as possible, she said, her tone resolute. We need to find a way to access that government facility, see if we can find any more clues or resources that could help us stop this. Liam shifted his weight, the crowbar in his hand glinting in the dim light. That won't be easy, he said, his expression grim. The streets are crawling with those things, and who knows what kind of obstacles we might face along the way. Evelyn looked up from her laptop, her eyes narrowed. I might be able to help with that, she said, her voice laced with determination. I've been monitoring the city's infrastructure and mapping out the least populated routes. If we time it right, we might be able to navigate through the abandoned areas and reach the facility without too much trouble. Alex felt a glimmer of hope, but he knew the journey would be fraught with danger. "What about supplies, weapons? We can't just walk into that facility unarmed," he said, his brow furrowed in concern. Liam nodded, his gaze sweeping over the group. "We'll need to scavenge as much as we can along the way," he said, his tone matter-of-fact, "and I can teach you all some basic self-defense techniques to help us survive the undead." Samantha took a deep breath, her expression resolute. "Then let's do it," she said, her voice firm. "The longer we wait, the more people are going to suffer. We have to try and stop this before it's too late." The group quickly gathered their meager supplies and followed Evelyn's lead, navigating through the shadowy underbelly of the city's infrastructure. The journey was tense and nerve-wracking, with the ever-present threat of the undead looming around every corner. As they weaved through the abandoned buildings and alleyways, Alex couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The city, once a vibrant hub of life, now lay in ruins, a testament to the devastation that had been wrought. He couldn't help but wonder how many people had fallen victim to the outbreak, and how many more were still out there, fighting for their lives. Liam, ever the steadfast protector, took the lead, his crowbar at the ready, his eyes scanning the environment for any signs of danger. Samantha and Evelyn flanked him, their own makeshift weapons in hand, their expressions grim but determined. Suddenly, a guttural snarl reached their ears, and a group of zombies emerged from the shadows, their decaying bodies shambling towards them. Liam sprang into action, his crowbar swinging with precision, while Samantha and Evelyn fought back with their own weapons, their movements fluid and practiced. Alex, his heart pounding in his chest, scrambled to keep up, his own fear and uncertainty threatening to overwhelm him. But as he watched his companions fight, their determination and resilience inspiring him, he found the courage to join the fray, his own makeshift weapon in hand. Together they fought their way through the horde, their labored breaths echoing in the eerie silence that followed. As the last of the zombies fell, Liam turned to the group, his expression grim. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice low. "We can't afford to linger here." Samantha nodded, her gaze sweeping over the group. "Evelyn, do you have any idea how close we are to the facility?" she asked, her voice tense. Evelyn, her eyes scanning the screen of her laptop, frowned. "According to the map, we're getting close, but there's still a lot of ground to cover," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "And from what I can tell, the area around the facility is heavily fortified, with a significant presence of the undead." Alex felt a twinge of unease, his mind racing with the implications. If the government is trying to contain the outbreak, then they must have some kind of security measures in place, he said, his voice low. Liam nodded, his grip tightening on the crowbar. "That means we'll need to be extra cautious and prepared for whatever we might face," he said, his expression hardening. "We can't afford to let our guard down, not for a second." The group pressed on, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence as they navigated the treacherous terrain. As they approached the facility, the air grew thick with tension, the sense of unease palpable. Suddenly, a sound reached their ears, a distant rumble that sent a chill down their spines. Evelyn's eyes widened, and she quickly consulted her laptop. "There's a horde of zombies heading our way," she said, her voice trembling, "and it's massive." Liam cursed under his breath, his gaze sweeping over the group. "We need to find a way to get inside that facility now," he said, his tone urgent. "If we get caught out here, we won't stand a chance." Samantha nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's go," she said, her voice firm. "We've come too far to turn back now." With a shared sense of determination, the group pressed forward, their footsteps quickening as the distant sounds of the approaching horde grew louder and more menacing. They knew that the journey ahead would be perilous, but the need to uncover the truth and put an end to the outbreak that had consumed their city burned brighter than ever. As they reached the gates of the facility, the group steeled themselves for the challenges that lay ahead, their eyes fixed on the prize, the answers they sought, and the chance to save what remained of their shattered world. The metal gates of the government facility loomed before them, a stark contrast to the crumbling, zombie-infested city that surrounded it. Evelyn's fingers flew across the keyboard of her laptop as she studied the schematics she had managed to access, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The main entrance is heavily fortified," she said, her voice tense. We'll never be able to break through without drawing the attention of the entire facility. Liam's grip tightened on his crowbar, his expression grim. Then we'll have to find another way in, he said, his gaze sweeping over the group. Samantha, you and Evelyn take the lead. Alex and I will cover the rear. Samantha nodded, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the perimeter for any alternative access points. There, she said, pointing to a smaller side entrance partially obscured by overgrown vegetation. That might be our best bet. The group moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled as they approached the side entrance. Samantha and Evelyn took point, their makeshift weapons at the ready, while Liam and Alex followed closely behind, their eyes darting back and forth for any signs of danger. As they reached the entrance, Evelyn paused, her fingers already working to bypass the security measures. This is going to take some time, she murmured, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of the approaching horde. Liam nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. We don't have much of it, he said, his tone grim. Those things are getting closer. Samantha turned to Alex, her expression resolute. Are you ready for this? She asked, her voice low. Alex swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. I have to be, he replied, his voice laced with determination. I need to stop this, to make things right. Samantha's lips curved into a faint smile. Then let's do it, she said, her grip tightening on her baseball bat. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity as Evelyn worked to breach the security measures. The distant sounds of the undead grew louder, the guttural snarls and the thunderous footsteps echoing through the deserted streets. Suddenly, a shrill alarm blared to life, shattering the eerie silence. Evelyn's eyes widened, and she hastily stepped back, her expression a mixture of triumph and dread. I'm in, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But we've got company. Liam cursed under his breath, his gaze fixed on the approaching horde. Then we need to move, now, he said, his voice urgent. The group surged forward, their footsteps pounding against the pavement as they raced through the now open entrance. They found themselves in a dimly lit hallway, the walls lined with reinforced doors and the air thick with the stench of decay. Which way? Samantha asked, her voice laced with tension. Evelyn consulted her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The main control room is down this way, she said, gesturing towards a set of heavy steel doors at the end of the hall. The group moved swiftly, their senses on high alert as they navigated the unfamiliar terrain. Liam took the lead, his crowbar raised and ready, his eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of danger. As they reached the control room, Evelyn paused, her expression grim. The security measures are even tighter here, she said, her voice laced with frustration. I'm not sure I can bypass them without setting off the entire facility. Samantha's jaw tightened, and she glanced back towards the entrance, the sounds of the approaching horde growing ever closer. We don't have a choice, she said, her voice resolute. We have to get inside and find whatever information we can. Evelyn nodded, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. Liam and Samantha took up defensive positions, their weapons at the ready, while Alex hovered nearby, his mind racing with the implications of what they might find. After what felt like an eternity, the heavy steel doors swung open, and the group surged forward, their eyes wide with a mix of determination and trepidation. The control room was a sprawling high-tech facility, with dozens of monitors and consoles lining the walls. Evelyn moved swiftly, her gaze fixed on the screens as she worked to access the classified data. Suddenly, a voice boomed over the PA system, its tone cold and authoritative. Intruders detected. Prepare for immediate termination. Liam cursed under his breath, his grip tightening on his crowbar. We've got company, he growled, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of movement. As if on cue, a horde of heavily armed soldiers burst through the doors, their weapons trained on the group. Samantha and Liam leaped into action, their makeshift weapons clashing against the soldiers' firearms in a desperate bid for survival. Alex, his heart pounding in his chest, watched in horror as the battle unfolded, his mind reeling with the realization that the government he had once trusted was now turning against him and his companions. Evelyn's fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes narrowed in concentration. I'm almost there, she muttered, her voice laced with determination. Just a few more seconds. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the facility, the impact sending the soldiers and the group alike to the ground. Debris rained down from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke. As the dust settled, Alex blinked, his vision clearing to reveal a gaping hole in the wall, through which a horde of the undead now poured, their soulless eyes fixed on their prey. Liam and Samantha sprang back to their feet, their weapons at the ready, their expressions grim. "We need to get out of here now," Liam shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of snarls and gunfire. Evelyn looked up from her laptop, her eyes wide with a mix of triumph and terror. "I've got it," she cried, her voice trembling. "I know the truth." Alex's heart leaped, and he rushed to her side, his hands gripping her shoulders. "What is it?" he asked, his voice urgent. Evelyn's gaze met his, her expression grave. "The government wasn't just experimenting with reanimation," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were creating a biological weapon, a virus designed to control the minds of the undead." Alex felt the blood drain from his face, the implications of her words hitting him like a physical blow. "Sweet God," he breathed, his mind reeling. Samantha and Liam fought their way through the chaos, their weapons clashing against the soldiers and the undead alike. "We need to go now," Samantha yelled, her voice strained. Evelyn nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard once more. "I've disabled the facility's defenses," she said, her voice laced with urgency. "But we need to hurry, before the virus gets out of control." The group fled the control room, their footsteps pounding against the debris-strewn floor as they raced towards the exit. The sounds of the undead and the soldiers echoed behind them, a symphony of terror and desperation. As they reached the entrance, a hulking figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with malevolence. Alex's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the twisted visage of the creature. It was the product of the government's twisted experiments, a living embodiment of the virus that had been unleashed upon the world. Liam and Samantha moved to flank the creature, their weapons at the ready. But before they could strike, a deafening roar shook the facility, and the creature charged forward, its massive fists swinging with devastating force. The group scattered, their desperate attempts to evade the creature's onslaught met with only partial success. Evelyn cried out as one of the creature's massive hands swatted her aside, her laptop clattering to the ground. Alex, his heart pounding in his chest, seized the laptop, his fingers trembling as he scrolled through the data Evelyn had uncovered. In that moment, a grim realization dawned on him. The virus was not just a weapon, but a means of control, a way for the government to subjugate the masses and maintain their hold on power. With a surge of determination, Alex turned to face the creature, his expression hardening. "This ends here," he growled, his voice laced with fury. The creature roared in response, its monstrous form surging towards him, but this time Alex was ready. With a well-placed strike, he brought the laptop crashing down on the creature's head, the force of the blow staggering the hulking beast. As the creature reeled, Liam and Samantha seized the opportunity, their weapons raining down blows with a fury born of desperation. The creature thrashed and howled, its massive form crumbling under the relentless assault. Finally, with a shudder, the creature collapsed, its lifeless eyes staring into the void. The group stood panting, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. Evelyn, her face streaked with dirt and blood, scrambled to retrieve her laptop, her expression a mixture of triumph and dread. "We have to get out of here," she said, her voice urgent. "The virus is spreading, and if we don't stop it, it'll be the end of everything." Samantha nodded, her gaze sweeping over the group. "Then let's go," she said, her voice resolute. "We've come too far to give up now." As they fled the facility, the sound of the undead growing ever closer, Alex couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They had uncovered the truth, a horrifying truth that threatened to engulf the world, but they were still standing, their determination unshakable. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, united in their quest to stop the virus and reclaim the world they had once known. The road would be long and the challenges daunting, but with the knowledge they had gained and the bonds they had forged, Alex knew they had a fighting chance. With a deep breath, he pressed on, his gaze fixed on the horizon, the weight of the world resting squarely on his shoulders. As the group emerged from the government facility, they were greeted by the harsh light of the sun, a stark contrast to the dimly lit corridors and shadowy corners they had just left behind. The air was thick with tension, but also with a sense of relief. They had survived against all odds, and now they had the knowledge they needed to stop the virus and save humanity from the brink of destruction. With Evelyn's expertise, they quickly formulated a plan to disseminate the truth about the government's involvement in the outbreak, leveraging every resource at their disposal to ensure that the world would know the full extent of the conspiracy. As they made their way through the deserted streets, they encountered pockets of survivors, each one clinging to hope in the face of overwhelming despair. With Samantha's leadership, they rallied the survivors, offering them shelter, supplies, and, most importantly, a sense of solidarity in the fight against the undead and the corrupt forces that sought to control them. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day the group grew stronger, their resolve unyielding in the face of adversity. Together they scoured the city for any remaining traces of the virus, neutralizing the undead and dismantling the government's infrastructure piece by piece. Finally, after a long and arduous battle, they stood victorious, the city reclaimed from the clutches of darkness. The truth about the outbreak was exposed to the world, and those responsible were held accountable for their crimes against humanity. But even as they celebrated their hard-won victory, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the back of his mind. The world had been forever changed by the horrors they had witnessed, and the scars of their ordeal would never fully heal. Yet amidst the rubble and the ruins, there was also hope for a better future, built on the foundation of courage, resilience, and unwavering determination. And as Alex looked out over the city, now slowly beginning to rebuild, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by a bond forged in the fires of adversity.